The parking lot was nearly empty when the sirens lit up the night. A homeless man crouched by a dumpster, and two officers closed in fast. Then a voice cut through the tension, a woman's voice, sharp and unwavering. She stepped between them, her son clutching her hand, and said the words that would change everything. What happened next brought 150 motorcycles roaring into her life, engines thundering like a storm she never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Iris Damien was 32 years old, a single mother living in a cramped two-bedroom apartment on the east side of Reno, Nevada. Her days were long and predictable. Wake at 5:30 a.m., make breakfast for her 7-year-old son Levi, drop him at school, clock in at the diner by 7, work until 3 pick Levi up, help with homework, make dinner, collapse into bed by 10 and repeat. There was no room for error, no buffer for bad luck. Every dollar mattered. Every shift counted. Iris wasn't bitter about it. She'd chosen to leave Levi's father 3 years ago when the drinking got worse and the yelling turned into something darker. She'd walked out with nothing but her son, a duffel bag, and a spine made of iron. People in town respected her for that, even if they pitied her circumstances. She worked hard, kept her head down, and asked for nothing. That Tuesday evening in late September, Iris finished her shift at the diner and drove to the Save Mart Plaza to pick up groceries. Levi sat in the back seat, humming a song he'd learned in school, his sneakers kicking the back of her seat in rhythm. Iris smiled despite her exhaustion. He was her reason, her only reason. She parked near the entrance, grabbed her reusable bags, and was halfway to the door when she heard raised voices near the side of the building. Iris paused, instinct pulling her attention toward the commotion. 2 police officers stood near the dumpsters, their flashlights cutting harsh beams through the twilight. Between them crouched a man, scraggly, bearded, wearing a torn leather vest and jeans that had seen better years. I said, "Hands where I can see them." One officer barked. The man raised his hands slowly, his face weathered and resigned. "I'm not causing trouble," he said, his voice rough but calm. "Just trying to stay warm." "You're trespassing," the other officer snapped. Store manager called. "Said you've been here all week, scaring customers." Iris's chest tightened. She recognized the man. She'd seen him around the plaza before, sitting quietly by the side entrance, sometimes with a sign that read, "Homeless Vet. Anything helps." He'd never bothered anyone, never asked her for money. Just sat there, invisible to most, forgotten by the rest. Levi tugged her sleeve. "Mama, what's happening?" "Stay close," Iris whispered, her eyes fixed on the scene. One of the officers grabbed the man's arm, yanking him upright. "Let's go." "You're coming with us?" "For what?" the man said, his voice cracking slightly. "Sitting? I wasn't hurting nobody. Vagrancy, loitering, take your pick." Iris felt something ignite in her chest, something she couldn't name but couldn't ignore. She thought of all the times she'd felt small, powerless, judged. She thought of Levi watching this unfold, learning what it meant to look away when someone needed help. She didn't look away. "Excuse me," Iris called out, her voice cutting across the parking lot. The officers turned. So did the homeless man, his eyes widening in surprise. Iris walked forward, Levi still clutching her hand. Her heart hammered, but her feet kept moving. "What's the problem here?" Officer Crane, the taller of the two, frowned. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you." "He's been sitting here peacefully," Iris said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I've seen him. He doesn't bother anyone." "Store policy," Crane replied curtly. "No loitering. He's been warned before." Iris looked at the man. His eyes were tired, shadowed by years of something heavy. But there was no malice there, no threat. Just exhaustion. "He's not hurting anyone," Iris insisted. "Can't you just let him be?" The second officer, younger and clearly annoyed, stepped forward. "Lady, we're doing our job. Move along. He's a veteran," Iris said suddenly, nodding toward the faded patch on the man's vest. It read U.S. Army, Iraq 2004. "Doesn't that mean anything?" Officer Crane's jaw tightened. "Doesn't mean he gets to break the law." "What law?" Iris's voice rose slightly, surprising even herself. Sitting? Being poor? Needing a place to rest? Levi squeezed her hand harder. She could feel his fear, his confusion. But she couldn't stop now. The homeless man spoke softly. "Miss, it's okay. Don't get yourself in trouble for me." Iris looked at him, really looked at him. Beneath the grime and exhaustion was a man who had once worn a uniform, who had once been someone's son, maybe someone's husband. And now he was invisible, pushed aside, criminalized for existing. "No," Iris said firmly. "It's not okay," Officer Crane sighed, clearly losing patience. "Ma'am, if you don't step back, I'll cite you for obstruction." Iris's pulse hammered in her ears. She had bills to pay, a son to protect, a fragile life that could crumble with one wrong move. But in that moment, something louder than fear spoke. "Then cite me," she said quietly. The parking lot fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Officer Crane stared at her, clearly weighing his options. The younger officer muttered something under his breath. Finally, Crane released the man's arm. "Fine," he said coldly. "But if we get another call, he's going in. And you," he pointed at Iris, "don't make this a habit." The officers walked back to their cruiser, slamming the doors harder than necessary. The engine roared to life, and they drove off, leaving Iris standing there, trembling from adrenaline. The homeless man turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that," Iris exhaled shakily. "I know. Name's Wade," he said after a pause. "Wade Holloway." "Iris," she replied. "This is my son, Levi." Levi peeked out from behind her, his wide eyes fixed on Wade. Wade nodded slowly, a ghost of a smile touching his cracked lips. "Thank you, Iris. Not many people see us anymore." Iris swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to say something profound, something comforting. But all she managed was, "You take care of yourself, Wade." He nodded again, stepping back into the shadows near the dumpster. Iris walked Levi back to the car, her hands still shaking as she buckled him in. As she drove home, the streetlights blurring past, Levi asked quietly, "Mama, why were those policemen being mean?" Iris gripped the steering wheel. "Sometimes, honey, people forget that everyone deserves kindness, even when it's hard." Levi was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You were brave." Iris's eyes stung with unexpected tears. She didn't feel brave. She felt terrified, but she'd done it anyway. What Iris didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that Wade Holloway wasn't just any homeless veteran, and her act of courage was about to ripple farther than she could ever imagine. That night, Iris couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation over and over. The look on Officer Crane's face, the way Wade's shoulders had slumped with resignation, the tremble in Levi's small hand. Had she done the right thing? Or had she just painted a target on her back? She rolled over, pulling the thin blanket tighter. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. Her apartment was modest. Second-hand furniture, peeling paint, a kitchen faucet that dripped no matter how many times she tightened it. But it was hers. She'd worked herself to exhaustion to keep it. And now, for the first time in years, she'd done something reckless. The next morning came too quickly. Iris dragged herself out of bed, made oatmeal for Levi, and got him ready for school. He chattered about a project on planets, his voice bright and innocent. She kissed his forehead at the drop-off line and watched him run toward the building, his backpack bouncing. Then she drove to work. The diner was buzzing when she arrived. The morning rush was in full swing. Truckers ordering coffee and eggs, retirees lingering over toast and gossip. Iris tied her apron, grabbed her notepad, and slipped into the rhythm she knew by heart. Smile, take orders. Pour coffee, repeat. But halfway through her shift, she noticed something off, whispers, glances. Her co-worker, a woman named Beverly with teased hair and a sharp tongue, leaned over the counter. "Heard you had quite the evening yesterday," Beverly said. Her voice dripping with curiosity. Iris stiffened. "What are you talking about?" Beverly raised an eyebrow. "Word travels fast, honey. You really went toe-to-toe with the cops over some homeless guy?" Iris's stomach dropped. "How did you—" "Officer Crane's wife shops here," Beverly interrupted, clearly relishing the drama. She told Marjorie at the post office, and Marjorie told everyone. People are talking, Iris. Iris forced herself to stay calm. I didn't do anything wrong, Beverly smirked. Didn't say you did. Just saying people are talking. You know how this town is. Iris turned away, her jaw tight. She could feel eyes on her now. Customers stealing glances, co-workers whispering behind the kitchen door. The diner suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. By lunchtime, the whispers had grown louder. Unregular, an older man named Carl stopped her as she refilled his coffee. That true what they're saying? He asked bluntly. You defended some biker bum? Iris's hand tightened around the coffee pot. He wasn't a bum. He's a veteran, Carl grunted. Veteran or not, those guys are trouble. You got a kid to think about, Iris. Can't be taking risks like that. I wasn't taking a risk, Iris said quietly. I was doing what was right. Carl shook his head, unconvinced. Right doesn't always mean smart. Iris walked away before she said something she'd regret. Her chest felt tight, her hands shaky. She hadn't expected this, hadn't thought about how people would react. She'd just acted on instinct. But now the consequences were unfolding. After her shift, Iris picked up Levi from school and drove back to the Save Mart Plaza. She told herself it was just for groceries. But deep down, she knew she was looking for Wade. He was there, sitting in the same spot near the dumpsters, his back against the brick wall. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his weathered face. Iris, he said softly. Didn't expect to see you again. She held up a paper bag. Brought you something. Wade's eyes widened slightly as she handed it over. Inside were 2 sandwiches, a bag of chips, an apple, and a bottle of water. He stared at it like she'd handed him gold. You didn't have to. I know, Iris said quickly. But I wanted to. Wade's throat worked as he swallowed. People don't usually. They don't usually come back. Iris sat down on the curb a few feet away, Levi hovering close. What happened to you, Wade? How'd you end up here? Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, setting the bag aside. Same story as 100 other guys. Came back from Iraq in 2006, couldn't adjust. Nightmares, flashbacks, couldn't hold a job. My wife left, took my daughter with her. I started drinking, lost my apartment, lost everything. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he'd told the story so many times it no longer hurt. But Iris heard the pain underneath. I tried the shelters, Wade continued. But they're rough, dangerous sometimes. So I stuck to the streets. Easier that way. What about VA services? Iris asked gently. Wade laughed bitterly. Wait lists a mile long. Paperwork I can barely read. Systems not built for guys like me. Iris's heart ached. She thought of Levi, safe and fed and loved. She thought of how easily life could spiral, how thin the line was between stability and disaster. Why'd you stand up for me yesterday? Wade asked suddenly, his eyes searching hers. Iris hesitated. Because no one else was going to. Wade nodded slowly. You're different, Iris. Most people look through us. Like we're ghosts. You're not a ghost, Iris said firmly. You're a person. You deserve respect, Wade's eyes glistened. He looked away quickly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. Thank you, he whispered. Levi, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. Mr. Wade, were you really a soldier? Wade smiled faintly. I was, kid. Long time ago. My teacher says soldiers are heroes, Levi said earnestly. Wade's smile faltered. Not all of us feel like heroes. Iris stood, brushing off her jeans. Well, you're a hero to me. And to Levi. Wade looked up at her, something unspoken passing between them. Be careful, Iris. People don't like it when you challenge the way things are. They'll make you pay for it. Iris's jaw tightened. Let them try. She took Levi's hand and walked back to her car, her heart heavy but resolved. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't regret standing up for Wade Holloway. Not now. Not ever. 3 days passed. 3 days of sideways glances at the diner, hushed conversations that stopped when Iris entered a room, and the heavy weight of judgment that followed her like a shadow. Beverly had stopped making snide comments, but the silence was somehow worse. Even her manager, a kind man named Harold, had pulled her aside. Iris, he'd said carefully, I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but maybe keep a lower profile for a while. Some customers are uncomfortable. Iris had nodded, biting back the words she wanted to say. Uncomfortable with what? With kindness? With humanity? But she kept her head down and did her job. She had bills to pay, a son to feed. She couldn't afford to lose this position. Still, every evening after work, she found herself driving back to the Save Mart Plaza. And every evening Wade was there. Sometimes he was awake, sitting against the wall with his eyes distant. Other times he was asleep, curled up under a threadbare blanket that looked like it had seen better decades. Iris always brought food. Leftovers from the diner. Sandwiches she'd packed. Once she brought a thermos of hot soup, and Wade's hands had shaken as he held it. Steam rising into the cold October air. "You don't have to keep doing this," Wade said one evening as she sat beside him on the curb. Levi was at a friend's house for a playdate, giving Iris a rare moment alone. "I know," Iris replied, watching the parking lot lights flicker on as dusk settled. "But I want to." Wade was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I used to have a daughter, about Levi's age." Iris turned to him surprised. He'd mentioned her before, but only in passing. "Her name was Emma," Wade continued, his voice soft. "She'd be 13 now. Haven't seen her since she was 5. What happened?" Iris asked gently. Wade's jaw tightened. "Her mother got full custody when I came back from Iraq. Said I was unstable, dangerous. Maybe she was right." He paused, staring at his hands. "I tried to stay in touch. Sent letters, called when I could. But after a while they stopped answering. Changed their number. Moved away. I don't even know where they are anymore." Iris's throat tightened. "Wade, I'm so sorry." He shrugged, but the gesture was heavy. "It's what happens when you fall through the cracks. People move on. You become a ghost." "You're not a ghost," Iris said firmly, the same words she'd said before. "Not to me. Not to Levi." Wade looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something crack in his weathered facade. Vulnerability, raw and unguarded. "Why do you care?" he asked quietly. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Iris thought about that. She thought about Levi's father, about the moment she'd packed their bags and walked away, about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, wondering if she'd made the right choice, about the kindness of strangers who had helped her when she had nothing, the neighbor who'd loaned her money for the deposit on her apartment, the teacher who'd given Levi school supplies when Iris couldn't afford them. "Because someone cared about me when I had nothing," Iris said finally. "And because it's the right thing to do." Wade nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "You remind me of my mother," he said softly. "She used to say that kindness costs nothing but means everything." "She sounds like a wise woman," Iris said. "She was," Wade replied. "Died while I was overseas. Never got to say goodbye." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of shared pain settling between them. Iris realized something in that moment. Wade wasn't just a homeless veteran. He was a man who had lost everything. His family, his home, his sense of self. And yet somehow he was still here, still surviving. "Do you ever think about getting off the streets?" Iris asked carefully. Wade sighed. "Every day. But it's not that simple. Shelters have rules I can't follow. Jobs won't hire someone with my record. And I've been out here so long, I don't even know if I'd fit back into normal life. What if you had help?" Iris pressed. "What if someone could connect you with resources? Real resources, not just bureaucracy?" Wade looked at her skeptically. "Iris, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but the system doesn't work for people like me. I've tried. It chewed me up and spit me out." Iris felt frustration rising in her chest. Not at Wade, but at the world that had failed him, at the system that had abandoned him, at the people who walked past him every day without seeing him. "There has to be something," she insisted. Wade smiled sadly. "You got a good heart, Iris, but some things can't be fixed." Before Iris could respond, headlights swept across the parking lot. A police cruiser rolled slowly past, the officer inside giving them a long, pointed look. Wade tensed immediately, his body going rigid. "You should go," he said quickly. "Don't need them thinking you're loitering too," Iris wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in Wade's eyes. Real visceral fear. She stood, brushing off her jeans. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said firmly. Wade looked up at her, surprise flickering across his face. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure," Iris replied. As she walked back to her car, she felt the weight of eyes on her back. The officer in the cruiser watched her until she drove away, his expression unreadable. That night, Iris lay in bed thinking about Wade's words. Some things can't be fixed. But she didn't believe that. She couldn't believe that. Because if Wade was beyond help, then what did that say about the world? What did that say about people like her, who tried to make a difference? She thought about Levi, about the world she was raising him in. Did she want him to grow up believing that some people were disposable? That kindness had limits? No, she didn't. The next evening, Iris brought more than just food. She brought a backpack filled with supplies, socks, a warm sweater, toiletries, a flashlight, batteries. Wade stared at the bag like she'd handed him a treasure chest. "Iris, this is too much. It's not enough," Iris interrupted. "But it's what I can do right now." Wade's eyes filled with tears. He looked away quickly, his shoulders shaking. Iris reached out instinctively, placing a hand on his arm. He flinched at first, then relaxed. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Thank you." Iris squeezed his arm gently. "You're going to be okay, Wade. I don't know how yet, but you're going to be okay." She didn't know if she believed it, but she needed him to believe it. As she drove home that night, Iris didn't notice the figure watching from across the parking lot. A man in a leather vest, leaning against a motorcycle, his eyes following her car as it disappeared into the night. Wade hadn't told Iris everything about his past. He hadn't told her about the brotherhood he'd once belonged to, the patches he'd once worn, the family he'd found after his blood family had abandoned him. He hadn't told her that word of her kindness had already begun to spread, and he hadn't told her that those brothers never forgot their own. By the end of the week, Iris's quiet act of compassion had become the talk of Reno's East Side. At the grocery store, women whispered behind their hands. At Levi's school pickup, other mothers kept their distance. Even the cashier at the gas station, a woman Iris had known for years, gave her a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. The judgment was everywhere, suffocating and relentless. On Saturday morning, Iris was hanging laundry on the small balcony of her apartment when her neighbor Claudia knocked on the door. Claudia was in her 50s, a divorced accountant who had always been cordial but distant. Now she stood in the doorway with crossed arms and a pinched expression. "Iris, we need to talk," Claudia said without preamble. Iris set down the laundry basket. "About what?" "About the vagrant you've been visiting," Claudia said bluntly. "People are concerned." Iris's jaw tightened. "His name is Wade, and he's not a vagrant. He's a homeless veteran." Claudia waved her hand dismissively. "Whatever he is, it's bringing attention to this building. Negative attention. Mrs. Patterson on the first floor said she saw a police car drive by 3 times last week. She thinks they're watching you." "Watching me?" Iris repeated, incredulous. "For what? Bringing someone food? For associating with criminals?" Claudia said sharply. "Do you know what kind of people those bikers are? They're dangerous, Iris, and you're putting all of us at risk by getting involved." Iris felt her pulse quicken. "Wade isn't dangerous, and he's not a criminal. How do you know?" Claudia challenged. "You don't know anything about him. He could have a record. He could be violent, and you're bringing your son around him." That struck a nerve. Iris stepped forward, her voice low and steady. "Don't you dare bring Levi into this. I would never put my son in danger." Claudia softened slightly, but her concern remained. "Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. I just think you need to be realistic. You're a single mother. You work hard. Why risk everything for someone who can't even help himself?" Iris took a slow breath, fighting the urge to slam the door. "Because everyone deserves compassion, Claudia. Even people who have nothing." Claudia shook her head. "Compassion is one thing, but this is foolish." She turned and walked back to her own apartment, leaving Iris standing in the doorway, trembling with frustration and anger. That afternoon at the diner, things got worse. Harold, her manager, called her into his small office at the back. He closed the door and gestured for her to sit. His face was kind but tired. and Iris knew immediately that this conversation wouldn't be pleasant. "Iris," he began carefully, "you're one of my best employees. You work hard, you're reliable, and customers like you." "But," Iris prompted, her stomach sinking. Harold sighed. "But I've had complaints. 3 customers in the past 2 days have said they're uncomfortable being served by someone who associates with homeless people." Iris stared at him. "Associates? Harold, I'm helping someone. That's all." "I know," Harold said quickly. "And I respect that. I really do. But this is a small town and people talk. And when they talk, it affects business. Are you firing me?" Iris asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Harold said firmly. "But I'm asking you to be careful. Keep your head down. Don't give people more reasons to gossip," Iris wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that this was wrong, that people's prejudices shouldn't dictate her choices. But she also needed this job. She needed the paycheck that kept Levi fed and the rent paid, so she nodded. "I understand." Harold looked relieved. "Good, now get back out there. Table 6 needs their check." Iris stood and walked back into the diner, her chest tight with suppressed emotion. She moved through the rest of her shift on autopilot, smiling when required, taking orders, pouring coffee. But inside, she was burning. That evening she didn't go to see Wade. She told herself it was because Levi had homework and she was tired. But the truth was darker. She was scared. Scared of losing her job. Scared of being ostracized. Scared that Claudia and Harold and all the others were right. That she was being foolish. That her kindness would cost her everything. She put Levi to bed early and sat alone in the dim living room, staring at her phone. She thought about calling her mother in Oregon. But what would she say? Her mother had always been practical, cautious. She'd tell Iris to stop making waves. Iris set the phone down and buried her face in her hands. The next day was Sunday. Iris had the day off, and she spent the morning cleaning the apartment and doing laundry. Levi played with his toy cars on the floor, oblivious to the storm brewing in his mother's heart. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. Iris opened it to find Officer Crane standing in the hallway, his uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Damien," he said formally. "May I come in?" Iris's heart hammered. "What's this about?" "Just a friendly conversation," Crane said, but his tone suggested otherwise. Iris stepped aside reluctantly, and Crane entered. He glanced around the modest apartment, his eyes lingering on Levi, who had stopped playing and was watching with wide, curious eyes. "Levi, go to your room for a minute." "Honey," Iris said gently. Levi hesitated, then obeyed. Closing his bedroom door behind him, Crane turned to Iris. "I'll get straight to the point. We've received complaints about you spending time with a homeless individual at the Save Mart Plaza. Given your outburst last week, we're concerned." "Concerned about what?" Iris demanded. "That I'm feeding someone. That I'm treating a human being with dignity." Crane's jaw tightened. "Concerned that you're involving yourself in a situation that could become dangerous. Wade Holloway isn't just some harmless veteran, Mrs. Damien. He has a history." Iris's stomach dropped. "What kind of history?" "Association with a motorcycle club. Criminal activity. He's been arrested twice for assault." Iris's world tilted. "That can't be true." "It is," Crane said flatly. "And if you continue associating with him, you could be putting yourself and your son at risk." Iris felt the walls closing in. Everything she'd believed about Wade, his vulnerability, his pain, his decency, was suddenly in question. "I'm not telling you what to do," Crane continued, "but I am advising you, as someone who cares about public safety, to reconsider your choices." He turned and walked to the door, pausing before he left. "Think about your son, Mrs. Damien." Then he was gone, leaving Iris standing alone in her living room, her mind reeling. That night, Iris couldn't stop thinking about what Crane had said. Was Wade dangerous? Had she been naive? Had she put Levi at risk? She thought about the man she'd come to know, the quiet gratitude, the tears when she'd brought him supplies, the way he'd told her about his daughter. Could that all have been a lie? Iris didn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind a battlefield of doubt and conviction. By morning, She still didn't have an answer, but one thing was certain. The world was punishing her for choosing kindness, and she didn't know how much more she could take. They approached slowly. As they got closer, Iris could see the man more clearly. He was in his 40s, maybe early 50s, with a salt and pepper beard trimmed neat, and eyes that held something unexpected: respect. His leather vest bore a patch she recognized immediately, the same emblem she'd seen on Wade's jacket. But this one was pristine, well-maintained, alongside other patches that marked rank and chapter. "Mrs. Damien," he said, his voice deep but not unkind. Iris stopped several feet away, positioning herself between the man and Levi. "Who are you?" "Name's Quinn Mercer," he said, removing his sunglasses. "Friends call me Ironside. I'm looking for someone, Wade Holloway. Heard you might know where he is?" Iris's throat tightened. How did you find me?" Quinn smiled faintly. "Word travels, especially when someone does something worth talking about." He paused, studying her face. "Wade told one of our guys what you did for him at that plaza, how you stood up to the cops, how you've been bringing him food." Iris felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I don't know what you want from me." "Nothing from you," Quinn said quickly, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I want to talk to Wade. He's one of ours." "Used to ride with us before?" "Well, before things fell apart for him." "One of yours?" Iris repeated, her mind racing back to Officer Crane's warnings. "Criminal activity. Association with a motorcycle club." Quinn seemed to read her thoughts. "I know what you're thinking. Whatever the cops told you about us, about Wade, some of it might be true. We're not angels, but we take care of our own. And Wade, he's family. Always has been." Iris's hands shook slightly. "Why now? Where were you when he was sleeping behind dumpsters? When he was freezing and hungry and alone?" Quinn's expression darkened with something that looked like shame. "We didn't know. Wade disappeared about 4 years ago. Stopped answering calls, stopped showing up to the clubhouse. We looked for him, but he didn't want to be found. Guys like Wade, sometimes they go dark because they don't want to be a burden." He shifted his weight, his voice growing softer. "We only found out where he was 2 days ago. One of our prospects spotted him at that Save Mart, recognized the tattoo on his forearm. He watched for a while, saw you coming by with food, saw how you treated him like a human being instead of garbage." Quinn's eyes met hers. "So I came here to thank you, and to ask where I can find my brother." Iris stood frozen, torn between suspicion and something else, hope maybe, or relief that she wasn't the only one who cared. "He's usually at the Save Mart Plaza," Iris said finally. "Near the dumpsters on the east side." Quinn nodded slowly. "Thank you." He started to turn toward his bike, then stopped. "You did a good thing, Mrs. Damien. Not many people would have. You gave Wade something he hasn't had in a long time: dignity. We won't forget that." He mounted his motorcycle, and the engine roared to life, echoing through the quiet parking lot. Then he was gone, leaving Iris standing there with Levi's hand in hers, her mind spinning. That night Iris couldn't eat. She put Levi to bed, then paced her small living room, her thoughts a tangled mess. Who was Quinn Mercer? What did he want with Wade? Had she just made things better or worse? She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? A biker came to my apartment asking about a homeless man. They'd probably tell her she'd brought this on herself. Instead, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The next morning, Iris dropped Levi at school and drove to work in a fog. She was pouring coffee for a table of regulars when Beverly appeared at her elbow, her eyes wide with excitement. "Iris, you need to see this," Beverly hissed, pulling her toward the window. "What are you—" "Just look." Iris looked, and her breath caught. Outside the diner, lining the street for as far as she could see, were motorcycles. Dozens of them, maybe more. They sat in perfect rows, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun, engines silent but presence thunderous. Men and women in leather vests stood beside them, arms crossed, faces serious. At the front stood Quinn Mercer. And beside him, clean-shaven and wearing a fresh leather jacket, was Wade. Iris's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," Beverly whispered. "Iris, what did you do?" Iris didn't answer. She walked slowly toward the door, her legs shaking. Harold appeared from the kitchen, his face pale. "Iris, don't go out there," but she was already pushing through the door, stepping onto the sidewalk. The morning air was cool against her flushed cheeks. Every eye on the street turned to her. Quinn stepped forward, Wade beside him, where she'd looked different. His beard was trimmed, his hair washed. He wore clean clothes, jeans, boots, and a leather vest identical to Quinn's. His eyes, once hollow and defeated, now held something new, gratitude and hope. "Iris," Wade said softly. "Wade, what is this?" Iris asked, her voice trembling. Quinn spoke, his voice carrying down the street. "This is the Reno chapter of the Iron Brotherhood. All 150 of us. We came to thank you." Iris looked around, stunned. More bikes were arriving, rolling in from side streets, their engines rumbling like distant thunder. People were emerging from shops and restaurants, staring in disbelief. "Thank me," Iris repeated. "For what?" "For seeing our brother when the rest of the world looked away," Quinn said firmly. "For standing up to the cops when they treated him like trash. For bringing him food and warmth and respect when he had nothing." Wade stepped closer, his eyes glistening. "You saved my life, Iris, not just by feeding me. You reminded me I was still human, that I still mattered." Iris's throat closed. Tears blurred her vision. "Wade, I couldn't leave you there. I couldn't—" "We know," Quinn interrupted gently. "That's why we're here." He turned to the assembled riders and raised his hand. As one, they mounted their bikes. Engines roared to life, a thunderous chorus that shook the windows of every building on the street. Then, in perfect unison, they revved their engines 3 times, a salute, a thank you, a roar of respect that echoed through the morning air. Iris stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Wade, who was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she'd met him. "You're not alone anymore," Quinn said, his voice barely audible over the engines. "None of us are. That's what brotherhood means." He looked at Iris. "And that includes you now. You stood up for one of ours. That makes you family." Iris couldn't speak. She could only nod, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. The riders began to disperse slowly, rolling out in waves, their engines fading into the distance. But several stayed behind. Quinn, Wade, a younger rider with kind eyes who introduced himself as Finn, and a few others. Wade approached Iris, his expression vulnerable. "I'm going back with them," he said quietly. "They're getting me into a program. Real help, not just bureaucracy. A place to stay, counseling, job training." "Wade, that's wonderful," Iris whispered. "It's because of you," Wade said, his voice breaking. "You didn't give up on me, even when everyone else said you should." Iris reached out and took his hand. "You deserved better than what the world gave you." Wade squeezed her hand, then stepped back. "I won't forget this, ever." Quinn nodded to her one final time. "If you ever need anything, Mrs. Damien, anything at all, you call us. You're under our protection now." Then they mounted their bikes and rode away, Wade looking back once to wave before disappearing around the corner. Iris stood on the sidewalk, her heart pounding, her face wet with tears. Around her, the street was slowly returning to normal, but nothing felt normal. Nothing would ever feel normal again. Beverly emerged from the diner, her expression awestruck. "Iris, that was—" "I don't even know what that was." Iris turned to her, a small smile breaking through the tears. "That was what happens when you choose kindness over fear." Inside the diner, Harold stood at the window, his arms crossed. But he wasn't frowning. He was smiling, and for the first time in days, Iris felt like she could breathe. The rest of that day passed in a blur. Word spread through Reno faster than wildfire. By lunchtime, every customer who walked into the diner had heard about the 150 motorcycles that had lined up outside to thank Iris Damien. Some came in just to see her, to shake her hand, to tell her they'd heard what she'd done. Beverly, who had spent the past week treating Iris like a pariah, now couldn't stop talking about it. "Did you see their faces?" she kept saying. "They looked at you like you were royalty." Even Carl, the regular who had criticized her days earlier, stopped by her table. "I was wrong about you, Iris," he said gruffly. "Takes guts to do what you did." Harold pulled her aside during her afternoon break. "Iris, I owe you an apology. I should have stood by you from the start. What you did, standing up for that man, that took real character." Iris accepted their words with quiet grace, but inside she felt something shift. The town that had judged her so harshly was now celebrating her. It felt strange, uncomfortable even. She hadn't done what she did for recognition. She'd done it because it was right. That evening, when Iris picked up Levi from school, something was different there too. Other mothers approached her, their expressions warm instead of cold. "We heard what happened," one woman said. "That was really brave what you did for that veteran." Another added, "My husband served in Afghanistan. It breaks my heart to think he could end up like that. Thank you for seeing him as a person." Levi tugged her hand as they walked to the car. "Mama, everyone keeps talking about you." "What happened?" Iris knelt down to his level. "Remember Mr. Wade? The man we helped?" Levi nodded. "Well, his friends came to say thank you today." "A lot of his friends? With motorcycles?" Levi's eyes went wide. "With motorcycles," Iris confirmed, smiling. "That's so cool," Levi exclaimed. Then his face grew serious. "Mama, you always said we should help people who need it." "You were right." Iris pulled him into a hug, her eyes stinging with tears. This was why she'd done it. Not for recognition or praise, but to show her son that compassion mattered, that people mattered. The next day, Thursday, something unexpected happened. Iris arrived at work to find a large envelope taped to the diner's front door. Her name was written across it in neat handwriting. Inside was a letter and something else, $500 bills. The letter read, "Mrs. Damien, words can't express what you did for Wade. But we wanted to show our gratitude in a practical way. We know you're a single mom working hard to make ends meet. Please accept this gift, no strings attached. It's the least we can do for someone who gave our brother his dignity back. If you ever need anything, call the number below. Your family now." Quinn, Ironside, Mercer, and the Iron Brotherhood, Reno chapter Iris, stared at the money, her hands trembling. $500. That was groceries for 2 months. That was Levi's school supplies. That was the dental appointment she'd been putting off because she couldn't afford it. She wanted to refuse it. But she also knew that refusing would insult them. They'd given this gift freely, with respect, not pity. Harold noticed her standing there. "Everything okay?" Iris showed him the letter, keeping the money hidden. Harold read it, then looked at her with something like wonder. "Iris, you've really made an impact." That afternoon, Iris's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello, Mrs. Damien? This is Quinn Mercer." Iris's pulse quickened. "Quinn, hi. Just wanted to check in, see if you got our gift." "I did," Iris said. "Quinn, it's too much." "It's not enough," Quinn interrupted gently. "Listen, there's something else. We've been working with Wade, getting him set up. He's staying at a sober living facility, starting counseling next week. But we wanted to ask, would you be willing to meet with him? He'd like to thank you properly." Iris felt her throat tighten. "Of course, when?" "Saturday afternoon. We're having a gathering at the clubhouse. Nothing crazy, just family. We'd like you and Levi to come. If you're comfortable," Iris hesitated. "A biker clubhouse. With Levi." Everything she'd been taught told her to say no, but then she remembered Wade's face when the engines had roared, the tears in his eyes. "The hope." "We'll be there," Iris said. Saturday arrived with clear skies and crisp autumn air. Iris dressed Levi in his nicest jeans and a button-up shirt. She wore a simple dress and cardigan, feeling nervous but determined. The clubhouse was on the outskirts of Reno, a large warehouse-style building with bikes parked in neat rows out front. As Iris pulled up, she saw families, women, children, elderly people, milling about. This wasn't the dark, dangerous place she'd imagined. It looked like a community. Quinn met her at the entrance, his expression warm. "Mrs. Damien, thank you for coming. Please call me Iris." "Iris," Quinn said, smiling. "Come on in." Wade's been waiting. Inside, the clubhouse was decorated with banners and balloons. Tables were laden with food, barbecue, salads, desserts. Children ran around playing tag. Music played softly in the background, and there near the back stood Wade. He looked transformed. He wore clean jeans, a pressed shirt, and boots that actually fit. His hair was cut short, his beard trimmed. But more than that, his eyes were clear, alert, alive. When he saw Iris and Levi, his face lit up. "Iris," he said, walking toward them. "You came." "Of course I came," Iris said, her voice thick with emotion. Wade knelt down to Levi's level. "Hey, kid, remember me?" Levi nodded shyly. "I wanted to say thank you," Wade said. "You and your mom, you saved my life." "I won't ever forget that," Levi smiled. "You look different, Mr. Wade," Wade laughed. "I feel different, better." He stood and faced Iris. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just feed me. You saw me. You treated me like I mattered when everyone else looked away." Iris wiped her eyes. "You did matter, Wade. You always mattered." Wade pulled something from his pocket, a small patch embroidered with the Iron Brotherhood emblem. "This is for you, honorary member. It means if you ever need anything anywhere, you call us. We'll be there." Iris took the patch, her hands shaking. "Wade, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep being who you are," Wade replied. "The world needs more people like you." The afternoon unfolded like something out of a dream. Iris and Levi ate barbecue with the families of the Iron Brotherhood. Finn, the young rider, taught Levi how to sit on a motorcycle. Other members shared their stories, veterans, fathers, people who had struggled and survived. Quinn pulled Iris aside at one point. "We're starting a fund," he said, "for homeless veterans." Wade's story opened our eyes. "We want to make sure guys like him don't fall through the cracks anymore. We're calling it the Iris Fund." Iris's eyes widened. "You're naming it after me?" "Your compassion started this," Quinn said simply. "Seemed fitting." As the sun began to set, Iris and Levi said their goodbyes. Wade walked them to their car. "I start a job next week," Wade said. "Mechanic shop. One of the brothers owns it. And I'm looking for my daughter. The guys are helping me track her down." "Wade, that's amazing," Iris said. "It's because of you," Wade repeated. "All of it." As Iris drove home, Levi fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted but happy. She thought about the past 2 weeks, the fear, the judgment, the doubt, and then today, the gratitude, the community, the hope. She'd stood up for one man, and somehow that one act had created ripples far beyond anything she could have imagined. Kindness, she realized, wasn't just about the person you helped. It was about what it inspired in everyone watching. And those ripples would keep spreading long after today. 3 months later, winter settled over Reno with a blanket of snow that transformed the city into something softer, quieter. Iris stood at the window of her apartment, watching fat flakes drift past the streetlights, and thought about how much had changed since that September evening at the Save Mart Plaza. The envelope of money from the Iron Brotherhood had helped her catch up on bills she'd been juggling for months. She'd taken Levi to the dentist, bought him new winter clothes that actually fit, and for the first time in years, she had a small cushion in her savings account. Not much, but enough to breathe a little easier, but the money wasn't the real gift. The real gift was what had happened to her community. The diner was busier than ever. People came from all over Reno, some just to meet the woman who stood up to the cops for a homeless vet. Harold had given her a raise, small but meaningful. Beverly had become something close to a friend, her sharp tongue softened by genuine respect. Even Claudia, her judgmental neighbor, had knocked on her door 2 weeks ago with a homemade casserole and an apology. "I was wrong about you," she'd said simply. "And I'm sorry." Iris had accepted both the casserole and the apology with grace, but the most significant change was in Levi. Her son, who had witnessed her act of courage, now looked at the world differently. Last week, he'd used his allowance to buy a sandwich for a homeless woman outside the grocery store. When Iris asked him why, he'd said, "Because that's what you would do, Mama." In that moment, Iris knew she'd done more than help Wade Holloway. She'd taught her son the most important lesson she could give him, that every person has value, that compassion costs nothing, and that standing up for what's right matters more than what people think. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Wade. "Got some news. Call when you can." Iris smiled and dialed his number. He picked up on the second ring. "Iris!" "I found her. I found Emma." Iris's breath caught. "Your daughter?" "Yeah." Wade's voice was thick with emotion. Quinn helped me track her down. She's in Oregon. She's 17 now. Her mom agreed to let me contact her. We've been talking on the phone for the past week. Wade, that's incredible, Iris said, tears springing to her eyes. We're meeting in person next month, Wade continued. I'm nervous as hell, but Iris, I get to see my daughter again. After 12 years. And it's because of you. Because you saw me when I was invisible. No, Wade, Iris said gently. It's because you never stopped being worthy of love. I just reminded you of that. They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Iris stood in her kitchen, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. One decision, one moment of choosing compassion over convenience. And look what it had created. Wade had his life back. He had a job, a home, his brothers, and soon, maybe, his daughter. The Iron Brotherhood had started the Iris Fund, which had already helped 3 other homeless veterans find housing and treatment. Her community had been reminded that kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength. And Levi had learned what it meant to be human. The next evening, Iris received an unexpected visitor. She opened the door to find Officer Crane standing there, his uniform replaced by civilian clothes. He looked uncomfortable, his hands shoved in his jacket pockets. "Mrs. Damien," he said. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Iris stepped aside. "Come in." Crane entered, his eyes scanning the modest apartment. "I'll get straight to the point." "I came to apologize." Iris crossed her arms, waiting. "I judged Wade Holloway based on his past," Crane continued. "And I judged you for helping him. I told you he was dangerous, that you were putting your son at risk. I was wrong." He pulled something from his pocket, a newspaper clipping. It was an article about the Iris Fund and Wade's transformation. I've been following his story. What you did, it didn't just help one man. It changed a lot of minds, including mine. Iris took the clipping, scanning the headline. "Single Mother's Act of Kindness Sparks Community Movement for Homeless Veterans." "I've been a cop for 20 years, Crane said quietly. "And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing people. I started seeing problems, threats, statistics." He met her eyes. "You reminded me that behind every face is a story, and everyone deserves a chance." Iris felt her anger soften. "Thank you for saying that," Crane nodded. "The department is partnering with the Iris Fund now. We're working on better protocols for dealing with homeless individuals. Training officers to connect people with resources instead of just moving them along. That's good," Iris said. "That's really good." After Crane left, Iris sat on her couch, holding the newspaper clipping. She thought about the night this had all started, how terrified she'd been, how her hands had shaken when she'd stepped between Wade and those officers. She'd been so afraid, but she'd done it anyway, and that, she realized, was what courage really was. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. December arrived with its cold winds and holiday lights. The Iron Brotherhood held their annual toy drive at the clubhouse, and this year Iris and Levi were invited to help. They spent a Saturday afternoon wrapping presents alongside Wade, Quinn, Finn, and dozens of other members and their families. Levi sat on the floor next to Wade, carefully folding wrapping paper around a toy truck. "Mr. Wade," Levi asked, "are you happy now?" Wade paused, his hands stilling on the ribbon he was tying. "You know what, kid, I am. I really am. I'm glad," Levi said simply, returning to his wrapping. Wade looked up at Iris, who was watching from across the room. Their eyes met, and in that moment 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. Gratitude, friendship, understanding. Quinn approached Iris, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. He handed her one. "You know what the best part of all this is?" he said, gesturing around the room at the families, the laughter, the warmth. "What's that?" Iris asked. "People are paying attention now, not just to Wade's story, but to all the guys out there who are struggling. Veterans, addicts, people who fell through the cracks. Your one act of kindness created a ripple effect. The Iris Fund has helped 11 people so far. 11 lives changed because you chose to see someone." Iris felt tears prick her eyes. "I was just doing what felt right." "That's exactly why it mattered," Quinn said. "Most people don't do what feels right anymore. They do what feels safe, what feels convenient. You did what was right even when it was hard. That's rare." As evening fell and families began to leave, Wade pulled Iris aside one more time. "I'm meeting Emma next week," he said. "I wanted you to know. And I wanted to ask, would you be okay if I told her about you? About what you did for me?" Iris smiled through her tears. "Of course. I want her to know that even when I was at my lowest, someone saw me as worth saving. That matters. It matters that she knows her dad wasn't completely alone." Wade pulled out his phone and showed Iris a photo, a teenage girl with dark hair and Wade's eyes, smiling at the camera.
"That's her."
"That's my Emma. She's beautiful," Iris whispered. "I don't know if I can ever fix what I broke with her," Wade said. "But at least now I have a chance. Because of you." They stood there for a moment, two people whose lives had intersected in the most unlikely way, forever changed by a single act of compassion. As Iris drove home that night, Levi drowsy in the back seat, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fear, the judgment, the doubt. Their 150 motorcycles roaring in gratitude. Wade's transformation. The community that had rallied around a cause. And she thought about something her grandmother had once told her. "You can't change the whole world, baby. But you can change someone's world. And that's enough." Iris hadn't set out to change the world. She'd simply refused to look away when someone needed help. But in changing Wade's world, she'd created ripples that touched dozens of other lives. Veterans who now had hope. A community that now understood the power of compassion. And most importantly, a young boy who had learned that kindness wasn't just nice, it was necessary. That night, Iris tucked Levi into bed and kissed his forehead. "Mama," he said sleepily, "when I grow up, I want to help people like you do." Iris's heart swelled. "You already do, sweetheart. Every single day." As she closed his door and walked back to her own room, Iris passed by the small patch Quinn had given her months ago. She'd framed it and hung it on the wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that one person can make a difference, that compassion is never wasted, that courage doesn't mean not being afraid, it means acting despite the fear, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest waves. Iris turned off the light and climbed into bed, a smile on her face. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in white. Somewhere out there, Wade Holloway was preparing to meet his daughter for the first time in 12 years. Somewhere, 11 other veterans were sleeping in warm beds instead of cold streets, and somewhere, a young boy dreamed of a world where everyone mattered, where no one was invisible, where kindness was the rule instead of the exception, all because one woman had refused to look away, all because Damien had chosen compassion over fear, and the world, her small corner of it, at least, was better for it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.